This is the Misdirected Mark Podcast, a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, our listeners. We are explicit, you have been warned, and I'd like to thank Mike Willard for letting us use his music on our show. Now let's pick up those mics and get on with this thing.
All right, Phil, I'm cleaning up the garage. Bob, help me pull out the fabrication machine.
Wait, we have a fabrication machine?
Yeah, man. Where have you been? That's how we build new things around here.
I figured we just made stuff up whenever we felt like it.
Well, we do that, but there's a more orderly way we can build things, and it seems prudent to pull this out for our next task.
Yes, because we are building mechanical romance mechanics. Did I say that
From the
right?
Department of Redundancy Department?
Yeah, from the Department of Redundancy Department.
So we're not going to make a joke about relationships, love, or sex?
I mean, we could.
But we take our relationships very seriously.
I mean, it doesn't really seem right to joke about it.
Not even an all-by-myself Vig Master joke?
I mean, we could go with the Divinals I Touch Myself.
Or, Dancing with Myself by Billy Idol.
Yeah.
Well, it's much harder to have a relationship with someone else if you don't love yourself first.
And with that, welcome to the 386th episode of the Misdirected Mark Podcast, where we're going to the garage to fabricate some mechanics about romance. My name's Phil.
I'm Old Man Logan.
And I'm Chris. All right, let's get started. Let's jump right into it before we have to go fabricate some things. So let's do one thing. So, Bob, what is your one thing?
So there is a Kickstarter that just started this morning called Return to Dark Tower. They are cashing in on nostalgia huge.
Big time.
There was a board game back in the day called Dark Tower, and it had this mechanical tower that you put in the middle of the board, and you would maneuver around and go to the tower for some stuff, and it would, calculate, like who won the battle and different stuff like that.
I calculated
Phil
everything.
remembers it.
The whole game actually ran through the simple,
super simple
mechanics of the tower.
So a bunch of people got together and they made a new version called Return to Dark Tower. They were asking $850 million. They funded in 4 hours.
$850,000.
$850,000.
Yeah, $850 million would be a lot of
$850 billion.
Kajillion?
Yeah. 850,000 they were asking for. They have 7,700 plus backers, $1.2 million already with 20 days to go. I think it funded. The problem is the price point.
No, the problem is this is the second 80s heartbreaker, right? That has come out that's over $100 to back, right? Car Wars came out a couple weeks ago, and for a game that was Car Wars, right? When I was a kid, Car Wars was the thing you spent $9 on.
Yep.
You got the little plastic box with you, like the little plastic box that just fit in your backpack with the whole game in it.
Yeah.
It's now going to be this like ogre-like fucking monstrosity with 3D printed cars and shit like that. And I get it, right? And I get where the board game industry is, but it like completely, I don't know. It just completely left, like it's out of the hands of everyone and it's into a very specific set of people. And then for Dark Tower, now arguably Dark Tower was an expensive game when it came out because that mechanical tower was not cheap. And we had it, like I had it as a kid. I'm actually a little sad, like when I saw their tower, like it's got like you put skulls in the top and it like they drop out of different places or whatever. Like it's interesting.
Yeah.
But I really was just kind of hoping that they would do the tower, but with just like an LCD screen and like a much better version of the original. But they've done like all this stuff to it. Like there's factions moving around the board and like and arguably so it's not a remake of Dark Tower, it's Return to Dark Tower.
Yes.
But also that's one where I was like, I really would have been very happy had they just rebuilt the tower with a LCD and like some better sounds and stuff, and just left the game as is.
Yeah.
Either case, I'm not backing either one of those. Like, those are way out of.
But clearly, there is a large number of people that are super excited about it because they're all over that Kickstarter. So. Mm-hmm. So.
What are we talking about next?
What is your one thing, Chris?
Oh, so this past Friday, we didn't get a chance to play our Eberron game because 2 people were out. Bob had a toothache that he couldn't deal with, which is fine, understandable.
Yep.
And Dave Mondello was unfortunately indisposed. So we busted out Imperial Assault and used the app to play it.
Oh, neat. You haven't done that in a while.
Yeah, the app will teach you, the app will run the bad guys for you and tell you stuff.
That's cool.
The game is so much better with the app. It's so much more fun, and the bad guys are way more dynamic in a lot of ways because there's like a list of things that they do. So like a bunch of pre-programmed things, and if it can't fulfill one, then you just move to the next thing on the
Does
list.
it just tell you like move this unit here, and you're like, yes, I can, or no, I can't? Or...
No, essentially it says like these are the bad guys that are on the board.
Yeah.
And then it'll say you're going to like move 3 to attack one of the characters or the closest hero.
Yeah.
And it'll actually say character names at times.
Yeah.
And then it'll say move to reposition, and repositioning is getting a certain amount of distance away from that away from any person. And then of course you follow the Imperial rule, which is try to always do what's most advantageous for the bad guy.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And there's different lists of commands for what it'll do too. So like if there's the probe droids,
Right.
they'll self-destruct. It'll tell you to have them
Nice.
move, engage, and at the end of the turn after engaging, blow up, and do this much damage to everybody
See if you
around.
can take somebody with you. Yeah.
That unfortunately, that is part of the casualties, isn't it? From Fantasy Flight,
Probably,
because that's Fantasy Flight Interactive, right?
I guess.
Yeah, I suspect.
I don't know. I have it on my iPad, so it's not going anywhere.
Until your iPad goes somewhere and the new version doesn't upload.
That's true.
That's
But-
good. I mean, that's the sad thing is, at some point you won't be able to run it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So play it while you got it.
Play
'cause-
it while it's hot.
Yeah, because they can keep it in the App Store forever, but what's going to happen is, eventually your iPad will obsolete out.
Which I have an old iPad anyway that
Yeah.
I never update.
Yeah.
So hopefully it'll just
Maybe
stay
just
on there.
store it on there. Keep
Yeah.
it.
Until this thing's battery dies forever.
Right. Right.
Then I really won't be able to. But then I can still play the game, just not with the app.
Yeah.
Which it's too bad. The app is a better version of the game, right?
Right.
All right. What's your one thing, Phil?
Played more Forbidden Lands.
Yeah, we did.
We're just rocking on this game. I had a lot of fun with it. We had an interesting situation where Sean's character was catatonic
Yes.
and was going to be catatonic for 4 days. So I actually very quickly, and one of the things I really like about the system, it didn't take much work. I quickly whipped up the stats for the NPC that was with them, and I was like, "Oh, you can play Nin."
Yeah. Just
Which-
play that character, right?
Which ultimately we didn't have to play because they were able to avoid the. I had written a couple little house rules. They people who were looking for them were searching, and they were making stealth checks to move around the city.
Sure.
So they made it out of the city, and just as they got found, like as the group had rolled enough successes, came morning when Sean's character, the druid they found to heal Sean's character, had finished the ritual to wake her back up.
Well, that's good.
So then they went out and got into another fight. The game's got a really interesting.
Cycle.
Well, the combat system's really interesting. It can either be like you're going to wade through these people like no one was there, or it becomes like really scary, like how close you are to dying in
It
that
has
game.
some scary moments.
Yeah, there's at no point where you're like, cool, I got this totally in hand, I can take all these guys. It's more like, cool, I have this if everything works out in the next few minutes. Otherwise,
You mean like every fight ever?
but like more so than a lot of other fantasy RPGs. Like
Yeah.
it's a lot more tenuous. Like Bob can do a pretty sick amount of damage.
I could do some hate.
But he lost half his hit points in the opening attack from this one guy.
Because
Yeah.
apparently the bad guys can do some pretty heinous amounts of damage too.
You
and
don't actually
my,
have
my
a lot of
parry
hit
failed,
points.
so most of the damage he did came through.
Right.
I will say, however, though, that I was looking over the rules because I was working on something for the game, and I was looking over making a cheat sheet of things that we forget or things
Yeah.
that we haven't taken into account yet. And there is a rule that is going to get used.
Yeah.
And normally when you do initiative, everybody gets a card. They have a card deck with numbers 1 through 9. And whoever's got the lowest number goes first. And you can't change cards with any of the other players unless it's the beginning of the round or the beginning of the fight. You can't change on the fly during the thing.
Right.
However, there is a rule. There is an action you can take, which is called a feint, where on your turn, you do a feint, there's no roll involved, and you swap cards with the enemy.
Oh, neat.
So in that fight
Oh,
where
yeah.
the enemy was going on 3,
Yeah.
and I was going on 6, the first person of the players,
You could have
I
stolen
could
their
have feinted,
initiative.
taken his initiative, and then gone first and kicked his
Oh,
ass.
that's
So
that's
that's going to be
cool.
something that I'm
All
going to
right.
take. Plus,
There's probably a talent that also
there's a
supports
ton
it.
of talents that that some of them I have already, and some of them I'm going to be getting that make my parrying way more useful. I already can parry for my companions by spending willpower points.
Yeah.
But there's another one where it lets me get a bonus to my parries and different stuff like that.
Bob's axe is so deadly that like anytime Bob hits somebody, as long as he does a point of damage, he also rolls for a critical wound. So like he's lopping things off of people constantly,
chopping toes off and feet and legs and arms.
We had a couple good crits.
Oh yeah.
Glenn had a pierced lung that took a guy out, and Sean, what you call it? Didn't Sean had a head stab, right? Like a full-on kill. Yep. Yeah, rolled a like 66, crushed like spear through the face kind of thing.
Man.
Anyway, yeah, that game is
Loads of fun.
It's a ton of fun, and we're just like incrementally playing this game. Like there's still the things that are considered conquests in this game. Like 15 sessions in, I think is where we are. Like they recruited a few more people for their stronghold. Like that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Like and we got horses.
We got horses now.
Yeah. They kill like that's the scale of this game, right? Like they got horses this session.
You were legitimately adventurers that are just building up your little empire.
Yep.
Yeah.
One block at a time.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a lot of fun. We're I think we're a few sessions away from getting into the Raven's Purge, which is the big campaign book. And Brother Jim is going to come join that game.
Nice.
So we'll have a fourth player, which I think should be good. If Jim plays a martial character, the group will probably be more poised for fighting, because right now Bob is the main fighter, and Sean and Glenn, like Glenn is very good with a bow, but falls apart when you close ranks with him. And Sean's okay melee-wise, but
really we need Sean for the magic.
Yeah. Anyway, Forbidden Lands, still loving it, still playing it.
All right, before we do our ad, let's do this ad right here.
Yeah, so this is Tim Hortons coffee, best coffee. We love it so much, Tim Hortons. Ding! We just, wanted to send us some Tim cards.
We love Tim.
It's on every show. Cups right on front.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Shameless plug.
That's our shameless plug. By the way, folks, if you're wondering what that was about, we're angling towards trying to get some Tim Hortons, low-level Tim Hortons sponsorship.
Yeah, pretty much.
So,
or at least recognition of our efforts.
Yes.
All right.
Very good.
Announcement time, huh?
Announcement time it is.
Be your first.
Yep. Captain, we are now in orbit of Landra 5.
Full sensor sweep, Mr. Everson.
Sensors are showing a Class M planet. Also, I'm getting some tachyon pulses emanating from 30 meters below the surface on the northern continent.
Recommend we take an away team down to the surface for closer readings.
Agreed, Mr. Vecchione. Get your team and depart at once.
Blast off our adventure with Infinite Galaxies.
Are you ready for some sci-fi action adventure? Robots, aliens, laser guns, starships, all of it and more can be yours.
Infinite Galaxies is a powered by the Apocalypse game based on favorites like Dungeon World and Apocalypse World, and includes new systems to promote high-velocity action.
Infinite Galaxies can be played using popular science fiction settings from literature, cinema, and television, and includes advice for those who want to create their own settings.
Infinite Galaxies is available on PDF and in print at DriveThruRPG and Indie Press Revolution. Check it out today.
Access granted.
All right, so tonight we're going to do something a little bit different in the garage. We got the fabrication station out with Bob's help. Normally, we would take mechanics apart to show you how they work, but tonight we're going to brainstorm and build mechanics around a topic, and our topic this evening is romance. Mm-hmm. Personally, I was interested in covering this topic, but, Pandas did a very solid episode about the GMing of romance in 151. That's episode 151, Something Kissy This Way Comes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in that episode, we talked about how to set up romances in session 0. We talked about how to manage romances arcs in games, and it's all real good, solid GMing advice, right? So if you want romance in your games, highly recommend that episode. I also tip my hat to Senda, because I love Senda's namings of episodes. Something Kissy This Way Comes.
Yeah, it's good.
Is
That's
fantastic. So when Chris wanted to do a romance episode, I was like, I don't want to do a workshop, because like we did all the GMing advice, but like we, and I say this, we is here on Misdirected Mark,
The three of us.
are huge fans of coupling narrative to mechanics.
Yes.
We are, in fact, that.
Right? So I thought it would be fun if we looked at the mechanical side of romance, because I don't think it's a thing that's done quite as much. Like, there are lots of games that have thematic and narrative romance, but not as many that pair that up mechanically. So I thought we should do that. And in order to do that, I'm going to steal the definition we used in Pandas 151 for romance. The feeling of excitement and mystery associated with love. Mm-hmm. Right?
Sure.
Very broad description. And it can mean committed love between people.
Yes. It can also mean sexual love between people. Mm-hmm. And we here at Misdirected Mark, we love romance in its many forms between any pair or group of consenting adults.
Right there, right? Mm-hmm. So you can, your romance can take whatever shape or form you want as long as it's consenting.
That's right. That's right.
Good. Okay, so with that, would you like to get started with an exercise? We're pushing off into waters that we don't normally sail upon, right? This is a very different format for the garage.
I love it.
Okay.
I love stuff like this, and I would love to take part in your exercise, Phil. And this should help us focus on the things that we want to build our mechanics around. So when it comes to romance, let's figure out what some of the traits and tropes we associate with romance are. Mm-hmm. Like, romance, love, and relationships. What are they? So let's start the brainstorm.
Yeah, so the reason we're doing this is because this is, and I think this model is kind of the same way you do it. This is the kind of, when I'm thinking about mechanics, right? This is kind of the approach I take to mechanics is like, what are the tropes, the trappings, or whatever for the thing I'm interested in? Mm-hmm. And then once I kind of know what some of those are, how can we turn them into mechanics? So that's what we're going to do right now is kind of think about the tropes. And we have a few ideas, but the chat room's there as well. And if the chat room puts up some things after we go through our list, this is a freeform episode. Like, we can throw them on the list too.
Chat room actually have two jobs for you. The people that are in there for you. One, keep telling us songs that have to do with personal love, because that was hilarious when I saw some of them popping up, like that Cyndi Lauper one. And
She-bop.
She-bop, yeah.
Yeah. Slow to the game.
Yep, no problem. And two, tell us more tropes and ideas that could potentially be mechanized for romance and relationships in games.
Amen. Okay. So when we were talking about this brainstorming, the one I was thinking of I thought would be a real easy one would be the bond between lovers.
Yes.
Right? So that shared experience, thing in common, right? The physical, intellectual, emotional attraction, but really like talking about like, what does one gain? What does one gain for being in love, right? Because I think we've all experienced love, and I think we all know that like when you're in love and in sync with someone, sometimes you are greater, or like you're better than yourself.
Yeah. So what is the benefit for being in love?
Yeah. Like, what does that get you?
Because they get you some things. There's also a detraction for, there's a detraction for being in love. I mean, it's not.
No, it's actually good. So you're right. There's a cost. There's a cost, right? So that's actually a thing that we should also talk about. So like, what's a thing you get? What's a cost that comes with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I like that.
The other part that I wanted to talk about was like, when we're talking about romance, and especially gamifying romance and love and things like that, there's in games and in drama, there has to be some sort of conflict or dissonance, and that dissonance will create space to play in and around the idea of these romance and love stories that we've all seen them. Like, they all exist in the world.
Sure.
I mean, you've watched any Hallmark movie. Usually, they're built in and around these things.
I've not watched any Hallmark
have plenty of Hallmark movies or romantic comedies.
I like romantic comedies.
Sure, and also just straight up romances. Watched plenty of those too. And they tend to fall into two categories: outside pressures and inside pressures, which generally those inside pressures are personal historical issues or the baggage that we kind of carry around with us, internal pressure. So outside pressure are things like other commitments and obligations, such as like work, friends, and family. Another one, if you've ever seen the movie Crazy Rich Asians, family issues, family pressures.
Without doubt, right?
That's a big one too. personal, when I talk about internal pressure, these kind of personal historical issues, we're talking about things like somebody who is emotionally unavailable because they're unwilling to talk about the deeper issues about oneself, and kind of overcoming that is a big deal often in a relationship. If you have personal views with your romantic partner that just don't match up, that can cause tension and problems.
Sure.
And also, like I mentioned before, emotional baggage or scars that causes what I like to call emotional scraping. So that's like when you and your partner come upon something internally for each other that don't match up, and not only do they not match up, but they kind of rub each other raw in a lot of ways. And if you can't deal with those issues, that usually can cause a lot of tension and problems.
It's going to be interesting to see how we're going to mechanize these things.
Yeah, right?
By the way, just to be clear, we did not prep the next section of
No,
this,
the
right? Like, this is-
mechanical part.
The mechanical
there's
part we're just
nothing.
going to do ad hoc. All right, so I had another one which I thought would be good, which is we should also talk about the mechanics around establishing romantic links. And we should differentiate that between when two PCs want to have a romance versus PC NPC. Right? Because I don't necessarily think I paint that with one brush.
No, I mean, one of them is about getting consent from the other player character at the table. And there probably is some amount of different mechanics that could be involved
Correct.
in that. But maybe there isn't between PCs and NPCs, because the NPC one is about getting consent from the game master. Because maybe the game master isn't comfortable
That's
with
fair.
that. Or if the game master is asking a PC,
Right.
it's getting consent from the player character, from the character, the player that's playing that
Exactly.
character.
Right.
Like, maybe you don't want those, maybe you're uncomfortable flirting with the person that is running the game, or maybe that person's uncomfortable flirting back with you, or engaging in that kind of emotional connection. I mean, that's just not what they're at the table for.
Absolutely. Right. We talk a little bit about that in 151, but I think that this is a case where mechanizing those things is actually important. Right? Like, I don't think this just has to be like, hey, good jamming advice is like, get consent, but rather you can bake that into a rule set.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
at that point in time, your rule set then is saying this game is about this thing.
Right.
So if you're not interested in this kind of play, don't play this game.
Not only that, but it can also say that, like, as part of the mechanism, you obtain consent first.
Sure.
Right? Like, so that you can proceed forward.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I'm getting at is just like, if your game, if the play of your game is dependent on some of these things, though.
Yeah, if your game is rom-com, the game of romantic comedies, and you're not interested in romance, yes, don't play this game, right?
Yeah.
And that's to me that's, so first of all, that's a very session zero, right? Like, that's very much saying, like, look, if you don't like horror, like, don't go play Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
Right? Same thing. If you're not into romance, don't play rom-com the RPG.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think that's first principles, right? So, I think you have to assume from, and I think we should assume that box has already been checked. Like, if you're playing our imaginary game, or we may be referring to other systems, but if you're playing the game, you've already consented to that part. That's like level 0 consent.
Yeah, because otherwise you can't actually play the game.
Yeah. It's
Like, if you were not consenting to something inside of the game after you started playing it, you should probably have a decent reason for it. Like, not that I'm uncomfortable with the romance part of it, but this isn't the kind of romance that I'm looking for to play out.
Yeah. Now, for instance, if we're playing D&D and romantic elements come up in the game, that's very different, because that's not like you consented to anything when you started.
There's no even initial buy-in for that.
Correct.
All right.
Correct. But yeah, if you're playing rom-com, the role-playing game, you've at some level consented to a certain part of the game. Okay,
Bob,
cool.
do you have anything to say before we move on?
No.
Do we have any other topics we want to add? Chris, do you think of anything else romance-wise that might be fun to explore?
No, I haven't. I mean, I went through the ones that I really thought were the crux of how these kind of romance stories tend to work.
I'm just thinking that I maybe want to add on what happens when a romance is lost.
Sure.
Right?
I figured that would go in and along with what you get when you gain a romance.
Yeah, that's possible, right? I mean, it could be a zero sum, right? You just gain something.
I mean, romances tend to have arcs. They're beginnings, middles, and often ends.
Indeed. That's
As much as we don't like to think about the ends.
sure. Oh, I mean, the first part is always fun. Initial
So is
romance.
the middle. I like the middle parts too.
Yeah. Nobody likes the end.
Nobody likes the end.
I say that, but somewhere out there, somebody's like, I love breaking up with people. It's the best.
my favorite part.
It's my favorite part. I like to fall in love with people just to break up.
There's a lot of ways that things end, like breaking up, moving away from each other. Somebody dies, like
Sure, you're naming. You're only helping the case, right? There's no one out there who's rooting for the
nobody
end.
likes this stuff.
Yeah, that's
I feel like nobody likes this stuff, right?
yeah.
It's zero fun.
Okay.
All right. So, is there anything in the chat room that we need to pull up?
Chat room working for us tonight.
Yeah.
Okay,
They named 3 more songs.
Of course they do.
Longview by Green Day, which I'm
Yeah.
not familiar with. Pour Some Sugar on Me by Def Leppard.
Nice.
Of course. Brass Monkey by the Beastie Boys.
Brass monkey.
I said
That
we could
funky monkey.
we could manipulate Linger by the Cranberries into a
Yeah, that's a
self-love
thing.
song.
Those were actually all songs on the list that I pulled those other songs from.
There you go.
But I was just going for older tunes because I figured they'd be better coming off of Bob and Phil's lips.
There you go. Eric asked, is mechanizing important in situations where the romance is not part of the primary arc?
No.
What makes side romance, in quotes, an important mechanic in an adventure game, for instance?
Yep, I think this is a good point, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, your quick no, right? Do you want to elaborate on that?
I mean, if the main arc and the main thrust of the game is not romance, and that's just something that came up on the side, that was unexpected,
Yeah.
then you can cobble some stuff together from the rules if you want to mechanize that. Like in D&D, that becomes a pretty strong bond. So whenever you play to the romantic part of it, you can grant inspiration.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a cool little thing.
And then when it breaks, if it ever breaks throughout play, then there's just no more getting inspiration for that stuff. Or the fact that it broke, if you play the animosity or the eventually coming around, if you play the beats of that story,
Yeah.
then you can keep granting inspiration for playing and progressing a cool story, right?
Yeah.
Or an interesting story, or whatever kind of, if that is what the game is going through.
Yes.
So that is a way that you can do that. But I don't know if it's necessarily important.
I don't think you have to mechanize. I don't think you have to mechanize every instance of romance in a game. I think that if you are playing Masks and you want your 2 teen heroes to fall in love, cool, they're in love. Right? Like, I mean, and again, if I was going to, mess with anything in the game, you grant influence over each other. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Right? You're a couple, you grant, whether you had it or not,
Yeah, you essentially automatically have leverage over each other.
you automatically have influence over each other.
Mm-hmm.
But again, Eric's right.
And I don't mean leverage in the bad way. That's just how it works, right?
Right. Influence is actually the
Sure.
game term.
Yeah.
So Eric's right. It's not always needed. I think in this case, what we wanted to do tonight was actually look at if you were going to mechanize it, what would mechanisms look like, right? Because you don't have to do it. And I will say,
Well,
in
explain.
full disclosure, because the chat room had said some things about it, there are some mechanized romance components to Ditch Lilies.
Sure.
Because Ditch Lilies is about
Sure.
queer love and things like that. So there are a handful of rules about some of these topics. Not all of them, but some of them.
I also saw a slew of names of games, which I've only read some of them, that essentially mechanize those things. Like the Romance Trilogy was thrown out there.
The Romance Trilogy is fantastic.
When Reichel's Yes,
Yep.
I saw that thrown out there too. So before we move on, like there's a game that blows my mind that it doesn't have like mechanics for this inside of it, which is a game called Blue Rose.
I'm sorry, Blue Rose doesn't have mechanics for this?
From what I've asked around, I'm like, what are I've said, so are there like mechanics for the romance aspects of Blue Rose, which is like romantic Mercedes lackey
Yeah, it's the
style.
Mercedes lackey RPG.
Yeah,
right?
You would
and
think
they're
there
like,
would be something
"Nah,
in there."
Not so much.
So just like if you're going to have romance, go have some romance?
It's just that's bizarre to me. It's so weird
Yeah.
Interesting.
that it doesn't exist. But before we move on to that next section,
Sorry. Cheer.
Blue Rose is actually a horrible romance game. That's funny.
Somebody, Shadowwall just asked, same with Apocalypse, doesn't Apocalypse World have a romance move? It has, I believe it's
sex
move.
move.
Yeah.
Which is not exactly the same at all.
Yeah, it's a little different. Especially for Apocalypse World. It's very thematic, and that sex move is
Yeah.
exactly what.
So before we get into talking and brainstorming mechanics, and we can talk a little bit about more games and like ideas surrounding like just relationships in general, not necessarily romantic ones. We have an ad that we should put out there, which is from The Lucky Die.
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that.
Yes.
Up above, you see blood red clouds boiling across the sky. I hear that you're about to go on an adventure.
You know how Emma likes to have me running around worrying about things.
You see armies at your back, dwarven, elven, human. You see all the races under your command, and you wickedly smile back at yourself.
We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way.
And you see this light being shattered into 7 different pieces.
It's not worth the risk.
Just say it's part of my inquisitive nature.
I have been following you for a very long time.
Do you want to count down? 3, 2, 1. Now. And you feel the world drop out from beneath you.
The Lucky Die Podcast is a weekly 5e Dungeons & Dragons actual play podcast. Join our adventure every Monday wherever you download podcasts by searching for The Lucky Die.
I'm just going to say, we say it every week when we play it, but I love that GM's voice so much.
I know, right?
Like, that accent is
very good.
Lovely.
It's very good.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so what are we doing now?
Cool. All right. So, cool. We're going to kind of settle in. We're going to do this very interactive, right? The chat room's going. We're going to work through our, like, each one of those things we brainstormed, or each of those items we brainstormed. We're going to kind of think of some mechanics, and here are the kind of the ground rules. You're free to make an arbitrary imaginary system for it, or you are free to grab a system that you like and express it in a system that you like. So we both did it briefly, like you did it with 5e, I did it with masks, but if you want to be like, cool, if I was doing this in Scum and Villainy, I would do it like this. If I was, if I was doing it in Hydro Hackers, I would do it like that, whatever. Like, you're free to come around it at any direction you like. You are free to also make up mechanics for multiple systems. We're gonna just wing it, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. I'm gonna see if Ange had said right before we went to commercial that she didn't want people to feel like the game has to have romance mechanics to have romance in it, and I think we totally agree, right? Romance can very much just be a narrative thing.
Yeah.
But I am a big fan. If you're going to do a narrative thing, why not do a mechanical thing with it? But not every game is set up for that. Yeah. So if this is us dabbling.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of role-playing games are essentially storytelling engines.
Yeah.
So if you can improvise a story about romance outside of the mechanics of the game and then it's satisfying to you and everybody else at the table, then there's nothing wrong with that.
And truthfully, I mean, let's be honest, the vast majority of RPGs, this is how they handle romance, is they just handle it narratively, right? Like, it's just a thing.
They don't like...
Right, it's like, well, our characters are in love. Cool, what does that mean? Well, it means our characters are in love. We'll have some dialogue scenes.
Yeah.
And that's it. But I'm getting to the point where I like our characters in love. Yes, we're gonna have scenes together and that kind of thing. But cool, what else does it do?
Yeah,
or how can I as a GM push on that?
Because often romance stories have that tension, right? Like, you are pushing on the romance, that connection in some way, shape, or form to create some sort of dramatic tension. That's how that works. Or the two characters are pushing on the tension between the two of them in some way to create dramatic tension. Of course, there are good moments too, because that's how love stories tend to go. But if you any book that you read or story that you read or story that you watch on TV that's a romance has that thing kind of going on with it, right?
Yep. And Boudet brings up a good comment in the chat room that what you call it, romance mechanics could also represent other strong interpersonal relationships. Yeah, there's no reason some of these mechanics we're going to talk about couldn't be platonic best friends, deeply committed like friendships, that kind of thing. Totally also possible.
Yeah, I mean, Hillfolk or the drama system, and also the system that sits inside of Smallville for Cortex Plus does both sides of this really well. Strong interpersonal relationships and romances.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, like, if you want a real world example of how that stuff can kind of work, like, Jen used to get mad at me like years and years ago, like, would you stop just hanging out with Phil? You're cheating on me with your other boyfriend.
Right. Yes. Which, time and attention.
Yes. Yeah. Time and attention matters. How much energy do you have to spend to it? Which is part of the cost of a relationship, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think it was Socrates who said, maybe it was Plato, who said that people really only have enough energy for 4 to 5 really close relationships, be they friendships or partners like that.
Socrates, who said, "I drank what?"
All right. So where do you want to go first?
Cool. Let's just pull the first one off the list, which was the bond between lovers. Let's talk about how we might mechanize it.
All right.
So we're gonna do pair because pair or group would work fine, but we'll just do pair because I don't know, doesn't matter. The bond between lovers doesn't matter how many people there are. What do you get? What do you think when you think of it?
Well, here, let's this bond between lovers. Can we talk like about the mechanic starting from the beginning to the end?
Sure.
So to me, in order to establish a bond, which would be a mechanized state, right? We are bonded.
Yeah, let's start with we are bonded because we have a separate bullet point for bonding.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we are bonded.
Yep.
I think you need. Oh, so we have a separate bullet point, establishing romantic links. Okay.
Yeah.
Because can we just do that one first instead?
Do you want to do romantic links? Sure. Let's do romantic links.
So to me, in order to become bonded, the state of bonded, there has to be some event or series of events in some way, shape, or form that leads to that bonding.
Sure.
Whatever that might be, like maybe it's a narrative bit to get to that mechanical point. So like we have to have a conversation that starts the attraction in some way.
Yeah, we can't bond out of nowhere.
Yeah. Then we have to maybe have a first date or a situation that is like we have another conversation beyond that relates to some romantic interlude.
Yeah.
And then after that, we can choose to become bonded.
Sure. I think I like all that. I will take it one step back, just a little bit before your mechanic.
Sure.
Right. There needs to be a consent that all parties. Right. I don't want to be just what you call it. Monofocused.
Yeah.
Right.
You're looking at the poly side of it too.
I'm trying to be. I want to be inclusive of all relationship types. So I think that right before the mechanics you're talking about, there's an opt-in consent mechanic.
Sure.
Right. Like both people have to say, I would like to take a chance on this romance.
Mm-hmm.
Right. For it to proceed. And that's actually a thing that we, after early playtesting in Ditch Lilies, Bob was actually in that playtest that we actually came up with as a mechanism, which was the spark. So the GM asks a player, like, is there a spark?
That's not bad.
Right? And it doesn't mean that there's actually going to be a romantic bond. It just says, it basically asks, are you open for this to potentially be romantic?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a consent in mechanic.
Yep.
Okay.
So essentially what you're saying is like, somebody's going to put an offer out there and then someone has to accept.
Yes.
That's technically the mechanic, which is similar to the drum system, like petition grantor.
Yeah.
It's a lot of that feel.
Yeah.
Except there's no negative or positive there's no negative consequence for denying.
Right. And Ascend is saying this is a player mechanic, not a character mechanic.
Yeah.
Right. So the GM asks the player, like, Chris, is there a spark with your character?
Yeah.
Here? Right. Because there's, and just like you said, there's no consequence for saying no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was some confusion about character versus player. It is a very much player mechanic. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So now you did the thing that I really like, which is we need narrative to lead to mechanics, right? So you had said we need to these characters need to go on a date.
Yeah. So
there needs to
there needs to be some sort of, I would hope, in play or a player asking player thing about, should we try a thing?
Yeah.
Or in play, somebody tries a thing and somebody's like, well, I'm just gonna X card that or hit the pause button on the script change and be like, let's not do that.
Yeah. So there's a level of consent.
Yep.
Right. That's an opt-in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we get that part, right? So we achieve some sort of level of consent and we say yes. The possibility for a romance occurs, and then you had said then there needs to be at least a scene.
Yes, at least. Personally, I would like to see a clock that's 2 or 3 things before you acquire
Oh,
bonded
this
status.
would be like the wooing.
The wooing, yeah.
Yeah, oh no, okay, I like this.
So
right.
at least a scene, but maybe because that happens sometimes, people just jump into relationships.
Sure.
But I would prefer a clock before the bonded status comes into play.
Okay, so I like this. So maybe a shared clock between players, or it's a clock that goes right there. I like this even more if we're talking about a game where there's high degree of romance between a whole bunch of characters, because now there's like multiple clocks between people on the table.
Now we have a web map thing going on.
Yeah, but like with clocks on it that are like, who's gonna fall in love here, right? Like, and yeah, so I like this that you have to engage a narrative scene that involves like your date or spending quality time together, something like that, and you may tick the clock.
Yes.
And maybe depending on the game, if this is an NPC, so if it's an NPC, maybe there's a role. But with two characters, like I'm often not apt to put roles on those kinds of things.
Let's talk about both sides of it.
Sure.
So you can just have the narrative beat be the narrative beat that puts the clock in, that marks the clock off.
Yeah.
And that can be something during like a downtime.
Yes, I was just thinking this, right?
Like good for a downtime thing.
Yep.
Or if it's in the middle of your adventure fantasy story, like the two of you did something really well together.
Yeah.
That's tick worthy. Like it's obviously subjected to the game master, but if you want to have the role thing go on for either side, like you'd be like, all right, we're going to take some time to go have this date in downtime, but we don't need to necessarily play it out. We can do a montage, but we're going to roll to see if it was a good date or a bad date.
Sure, I like that.
That can happen
I
too.
like that. I was just thinking along the lines, like, say we have this consent-in mechanic, right? So our characters consent and we create the empty clock, right? And then the clock exists.
Yep.
And then at any point in the game, we can have a meaningful interaction, right? Like,
sure.
Maybe we're sitting on watch while the rest of the group is camping and we're having, a discussion talking about our childhoods or laughing or whatever. And then, like, how at the end of PBTA games, when you hand out experience points,
sure,
it says like, did you find a treasure? Did you defeat a monster? Did you, like, one of those questions could simply be like, did you and your paramour engage in a meaningful romantic scene?
Yeah, that's totally another version of this idea. That
and then tick,
about.
that's add a tick to your clock.
Version of that mechanic. Right?
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Because that'll spread it out so people won't just go at it over and over and over again until they get their bonded status.
Correct.
They have to do it over the course of several sessions.
Yeah, exactly. So now you've actually made a little arc. So then if you're going to make a thing that fills up a clock, referring back to our past episode on clocks, is there a thing that empties the clock? Like, is there a thing that, like, can you stumble? Or do you just have to complete the requisite number of adventures, like the requisite number of scenes?
Well, what is the thing that could possibly make the clock stumble? I mean, I think that's a move, if we're talking about Powered by the Apocalypse type games or Game Master moves, like, that's a move that the Game Master could utilize. Like, I'm going to introduce a complication to put stress on this relationship before it's actually bonded.
Interesting.
And then, as Bob blows his nose.
On mic.
By the way,
do it off mic.
I know, it's fine. It's okay. We understand. By the way, Bob just created a complication in our romantic relationship right here.
Right, we're sitting here trying to have a conversation and make some sort of connection, and Honky McHonker over here is like, killing the mood.
Why you gotta honk block me, man?
I didn't just, pick Goose as a nickname once. It was earned.
So I do think it's interesting. Now, if you have some sort of role-based mechanism, then yes, failure to roll can tick back your clock.
That is a way to do it. The only other way I can think that two players that are having characters that are in this romantic bonding situation,
right,
is to give them some sort of carrot for causing themselves trouble.
Sure. Like, well, what if, spitballing our mechanic here, what if you get a point for having a meaningful interaction for the clock, but otherwise you get an experience point if you had a bumpy, like, if you either don't gain or lose a point from your clock. So now you're having the decision, like, do I want my extra experience point, or do I want to advance my romance?
Because that is the carrot for not advancing your romance.
Right. Mm-hmm. Like, you had a weird interaction. You don't hate each other, right? But you went on a date, like in all rom-coms, right? Like, in rom-coms, there's the dates where they super connect, right? And it's really sweet. And then there's like the weird, awkward dates where like they kind of bounce off of each other, or they go out for a picnic and then one of them falls off the boat, right? And like,
By the way, we've just written the mechanic for the sitcom role-playing romance game.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Because this clock mechanic, you can just make it bigger to extend how relationships progress, or
So-
have multiple clocks or how relationships progress.
So if we go to Friends, right, and we look at that season 2 arc of Ross and Rachel, the episodes that lead up to them getting together are brilliant, right? Like Rachel gets to a point where she's like, oh my God, I'm in love with Ross. She goes to the airport to meet him. He comes off the plane with Julie.
Yep.
Right? And then so the clock goes forward, then the clock falls back.
Yeah, because Ross has multiple clocks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With these different characters,
Yes.
as does Rachel have probably multiple clocks with different characters.
Yeah. And a great example of the bad date, the movie Hitch, when he first goes out
Yep.
with
Yeah.
Eva Mendes, and they go jet skiing,
And
his jet ski dies, and he goes to climb on hers. He kicks her in the head, knocks her into the
Right.
water.
Right. So this is a point where it's like, cool.
Yeah.
The romance doesn't romance doesn't advance, but you both get an experience point
Yeah.
for like having this like lousy.
Or that is a case where the die roll went poorly.
Yes. Yeah.
Although, like, Hitch has a problem in that, like, some sort of detriment in that particular. If that was a game, Hitch's detriment is like anything personally romantic for him goes poorly. Like he has like disadvantage on all those.
Yeah.
levels.
So that's like his trouble aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. The GM's literally sitting on a bag of fate points, going like, a date? What? Flick.
I just want to know how many other podcasts out there are talking about this topic.
I'm not thinking a lot.
That's all.
Right? I'm thinking not
man.
a lot. All right. So I like this. Right. So I like that we have a mechanism that it's consent based.
We have multiple mechanisms that we can
Yes.
utilize. Like there's a bunch of different ways that you can construct this.
Yep. Absolutely.
Around the ebb and flow of a relationship being built.
Yeah.
All right.
I dig. Okay.
So this is the establishing romantic links part.
Yes.
So let's talk about now when we're bonded between lovers.
Yes. So let's say we've survived the gauntlet. We've filled our clock. Our characters are now bonded. What does bonding get us? So before we talk about it mechanically, what does being partnered with somebody get us? Like, I think, and I'll say personally, like, I think one of the things that being bonded with a partner gets you is a different kind of strength. Like, often a partner fills in places where either you're insecure or unsure, and they kind of just, like, their presence, like, just kind of give, like, it makes you different.
It makes if it's a really solid relationship, usually
Right.
that presence for both people just makes you a better version of yourself.
Yes, and so I was going to say that's a highly cliched statement, but I do think there's a lot of truth to it.
I don't think it's that cliched. I've been with the same person for 12 years.
Right. So,
And I am, over the course of time, I've only ever gotten, in a lot of ways, when things are good, better.
so to that,
That's very subjective and
No, it's fine. We're
anecdotal, but
let's be clear. When we are making any mechanics whatsoever, we're being very subjective. When we write a car chase mechanic in a game, none of us have ever been in a professional. Like, let's be truthful. We've actually been in more romances than we've been in car chases. So when you say that's subjective, I guess what I'm saying is, like, if we're qualified to go ahead and make car chase mechanics, we're way qualified to make mechanics about romances because we've actually done those things.
yeah, but
I've never killed a ninja.
Yeah, but we're making those mechanics based on the fact that that we're just pretending to be something that we've never done. Most of us in our lives have been involved in romantic
No,
situations.
but that's what I'm saying. So when you say, because you were saying it kind of somewhat dismissively or caging it about this idea, and I'm saying
I just didn't want to come off as being an expert. I'm not like a
I'm right.
expert on relationships. or
No,
anything like
that's
that.
fine. I guess what I'm saying is your statement is valid because you've actually lived it.
Sure, my statement is valid from my point of view.
Yes, and I will echo your point of view. I think that your point of view is also one that I share as well, right? So, how do you want to put that to a mechanic?
How are we gonna? So, it depends on what is in your game, right? Now, if we're just talking about a game that we're making ourselves, that is now, honestly, the bonding. Sometimes that plays into a rom-com if we're going to talk about rom-coms.
Sure.
But usually when you get the bonding in a rom-com, there's something that then breaks the bond.
Yes.
So-
So whatever bond we have is not
So using a rom-com as the model for that doesn't really work.
Okay.
Now, if we're talking about an ongoing relationship for characters in a show or something like that,
Sure.
I guess How I Met Your Mother, maybe not the best thing, but
well, I mean, Marshall and Lily.
Marshall and Lily is where I'm going.
Now,
with
they
this.
did have a break at one point.
They did, but they were also together for a very long time.
Yes.
So that, like, Marshall didn't have... We saw what happened when Marshall didn't have Lily, right?
Yeah.
So Marshall was a mess. But with Marshall having Lily, he was much more able to have fun and be relaxed and not have the anxiety that he had without her.
Yes. Absolutely.
That's who he was with Lily, was less anxious about everything.
Yeah, and Lily actually wasn't in much better shape than without Marshall.
Correct.
Now, so there's a thing I want to be very careful about.
I'm also open to other examples from the chat room. Help me out here.
Yeah, I also want to be very careful. We're talking about this now in a very positive light, right? We're talking about two quote good / healthy individuals engaged in a healthy relationship, right?
Yes.
There is a flip side to this coin, which we can decide if we want to talk about in this episode or not, where that kind of relationship
right for each other.
No, where the relationship could be very harmful.
Well, the relationship isn't always positive for them because Lily often wants to have sex, and that gets into the way of Marshall getting his law degree a lot of the time.
Right. Okay, so cool. Let's talk about this bond because I think that's actually one of the that goes into one of your topics next, which is pressures.
Yes.
All right. So
but we need the positive. We need the benefit for the bond first.
Yeah. So we need a benefit for the bond. So
assuming the game is about having a benefit for the bond and not just you are bonded and that is a state, and then you are unbonded as that is a state, and the game ebbs and flows different ways when those things happen.
Right. So like for instance, in the John Wick game, House of the Blooded.
Sure.
Now this is not romantic, but if you have a wife in the game, during the seasonal moves, you get an extra action because your wife can actually also command things in your kingdom.
Yeah, it's political though.
No, I know. I'm saying, but this is like so we're talking about what's the benefit of having this bond. I like the idea of strength. So what does a bond get you in a game?
I think that the bond, if we're going to talk about it as a positive thing, gets you, when you're with that person or that person has your back or you have their back, they get whatever the bonus or the positive advantages to the core mechanic.
Sure.
If this is not the core mechanic of your game, or it's if there's another core mechanic to your game.
Right.
Like
so
when I try to do X and my partner has my back, I get my dice pool plus one or something like that.
So in D&D, this could be a bonus or advantage.
This is advantage.
Okay, so you get it. So if I'm defending my lover.
No, if my lover is helping me defend the kingdom.
Oh, cool. Okay, then
it's a way more positive way to put it.
I like it. Cool.
Right. Also, if you're defending your lover.
Sure.
But like the other way is like, we're gonna go beat this dragon down. They're with me in the same area or whatever, so like together fighting this dragon, we both have advantage on our checks.
Sure. Now maybe we want to limit that because we don't want it all spammy, right? So
cool.
Maybe it's...
So like, well, you have this pool of points that you can utilize to give yourself inspiration.
There you go. Yeah, perfect.
It's our bond pool.
I like it. I like that
All
a lot.
you have to do is tell me narratively how your bond is helping you do this thing.
Right, and in an action romance movie, what I'm picturing then is like you see the two lovers back to back fighting, like it's a slow motion montage scene, and they're back to back and they're fighting, but at the same time, like when they move together.
Yeah.
Right. Like as soon as one pivots, the other one pivots with them, and it shows like that connectivity.
Yeah, that's Evie and Brendan Fraser's character in The Mummy, in the second Mummy movie, when they're trying to track down their kid. They often work together to do things.
Yeah. So I think that's really cool. I think if we are talking about fate, then in Fate, your relationship is an aspect.
With some invokes on it.
Yeah. And and you can definitely be like in the middle of a scene, be like, yeah, we're fighting all these things. Oh, I want to get a higher, piece, and I'm going to take one of those invokes because like I cartwheel over my lover's back.
Or even better, you take the thing and say, hey, how did you help me?
Right. Now I'm thinking of Rey and Kylo in the second movie when they're fighting in the in the chamber.
So they're not. I mean, they
get split apart at times, but there's like this one point where they come together, right? And they're like on back to back. They're
Sure.
not.
It's a terrible example.
They're
because
not in a relationship, but they are in a relationship.
It's weird.
Yeah, it's not a good. It's
having a
not
weird
well
day.
defined.
Can't talk about the third one, so
Sorry.
we should go away from that because
Sorry.
otherwise we can't actually have the real
Right, everybody
full
got
discussion.
nervous when I
Yeah.
said it. I was like, relax, I'm talking about the second movie. Okay, so tapping into a core mechanic for a bonus, right? So you said advantage. I said in Fate, that's an invoke. If I was doing something in one, maybe there's a die I can pull or get, like an extra die for a roll, right? That's based on that relationship.
It's whatever the bonus is. I mean, that's essentially what the
+1 forward.
when you're bonded, you have these benefits.
Sure.
Whatever those benefits are that fit into the game that you're playing. If it's one that we're creating from scratch, it is whatever the core mechanic is. So like if it's ordered number engine and we're bonded, like instead of pulling a die out of the group pool, maybe you get to pull 2.
Oh yeah.
Right, like
That's cool.
that is how that works.
Yeah.
That there is maybe there's a pool for overcoming a complication in that pool.
Sure.
Like I'm going to rely on my bond to help me overcome this this complication that has been assessed to me. Same thing for any Forge in the Dark game.
Right. So in Ditch Lilies, what we did was in Ditch Lilies, there's always a couple out of the 4 band members. Two of them are in a relationship at the start of the game. They actually get a special ability called a duet that's between them.
Yeah.
And either one of them can use it, but they have to bank 3 dice to activate it.
Sure. So that's like you have to build it up.
Yeah, you have to build it up. But once you build it up, so to back up, every character has a solo, which is their own special ability. And when we wrote the duets, we took pieces of both of their abilities and mixed them together.
Oh, that's cute. I like that.
So it actually is the reflection of the combination of the relationship.
That's neat.
And so
like a gem fusion.
Yeah.
it is very much a gem fusion. To be honest,
By
if
the way,
we were
if we were
making
writing that game, then you would just
if
have
we
the
were
gem
making the
fusion.
Steven Universe game, this is
And then the group move is the band playing together is when they all fuse together. Like,
right.
wow, look at that.
What was really interesting was when we were explaining it at Metatopia.
Hey, Queen Senda, you want to get on that? Like
we
you
need
could
we
design
need an
that, right?
IP. When we were explaining the game at Metatopia, we were talking about the duet, and somebody looked at us, and I was like, I think it was Senda who was like, it's like a fusion in Steven Universe, and they were like, yes, and
I mean,
it was.
You could legit just make the unofficial Steven Universe game that we can run at conventions, and then be like, hey, there's this game that's like it that's called the Ditch Lilies.
I'm
just saying,
Yeah.
like, just throwing it out there.
It would do it. Oh, I know. Yeah, she says. So yeah, that was one of the ways we addressed it in Ditch Lilies was your love has your love gives you access to a special ability.
Sure.
What we found in playtesting was the 2 people who weren't in the relationship were like, well, what about us? Because they had just broken up.
They get a duet too.
Well, that's what we figured out is we need another set of duets that reflects like your healing path of like you broke up.
Sure.
Like how do you go back to just being friends?
Yeah, that is reestablishing that bond of friendship. So the mechanic can serve as both a relationship mechanic and a friendship mechanic.
Yes.
It's good.
Yeah, it needs a little work. We're still working on that.
Where are we at here? So that's what the bond between lovers does.
Yep,
as far as
absolutely.
positive. What about negatively?
So now I think we get into we're heading into the part where you were talking about pressures.
There is just the negative aspect of having the bond though, because the bond costs you some amount of time and resources to maintain.
So I think the amount of it either costs you, so cool. If we have a downtime mechanic in our game, then I would say that one of the things you have to use part of your downtime mechanic for is maintaining your
relationship.
And if you don't, your relationship would take stress. Like maybe I put a clock on your relationship, and it's like, cool, we have this downtime. We're gonna take a downtime action and have like a meaningful date, some time away together or whatever. But maybe we don't, right? And now it's like, well, you don't, and a tick goes on the clock to break up, because if you keep neglecting your relationship, then you don't have one.
Or one of the points that you have access to for that bond, if it's a mechanic like that, isn't there.
Yeah, maybe it goes inert.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not automatically broken up, but you can't actually use the bond until you reconnect. That's actually a nicer way to do it. Like, it's not as...
I mean, you can push it farther than that. Like, both those systems work.
Yeah.
It's just that then when you have that mark on there, does it persist or does it go away as soon as you address it?
Correct. Like, maybe, I mean, so it depends. If you're doing a darker or heavier
so
game...
many choices there, right? There's so many mechanical design choices.
There's some there's some tone that you want to put. Like, if your game is mostly lighthearted, then like clear the clock, your power reactivates.
Yeah.
If you're playing something more gritty or more realistic, like clear the clock and have to rebuild.
Well, here, let me throw this on you too, because we haven't gotten to it yet. But you have this clock now for breaking up.
Yeah.
If you don't reestablish your bond between things, maybe that clock just doesn't clear. Then the things that happen during the scenarios or the sessions
Keep adding
that clock up till your bond actually does go inert and you can't do anything with it, and it actually takes some other amount of effort to get rid of that.
Yeah, so that's actually like in a Forged in the Dark game, that is the equivalent of like buying off your heat.
It is, yes.
So you don't always have to take it, because if you didn't have if you had a really clean adventure and you didn't have a lot of heat, you might just be like, we could live with this amount of heat for right now. But later you could be like, oh, you know what? I have to clear some heat. So in a relationship sense, you could be like, we have a couple points on the clock. It's no big deal. And then after a particularly bumpy session, you might be like, you know what? I got to spend one of the downtime actions reconnecting with my partner. Otherwise this is going to be a mess.
Yep.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's there's an interesting design space right there, and I love these ideas for these, not just necessarily romance, but even interpersonal relationships between characters. Like to have, because in Hydro Hackers, right, there's the thing about who you're cool with and things like that.
Yes.
Right? I mean, there could be a whole different set of mechanics about like, well, I'm cool with this person, but it requires me some time at some point to like maintain that cool instead of just randomly switching it over the course of time. I mean, I would never change it for Hydro Hackers.
No.
It's perfectly fine the way it is.
No, and what the mechanic in Hydro Hackers is that at end of session, you have to, in order to move one of them, you have to kind of say why.
Yeah.
Right? Like, now in game you can temporarily move them around because you can have there's a move called Share Water. Right. Where you have a meaningful moment with someone.
But from the relationship end of things, like this is another point of pressure that the game master can push on, which is interesting. Like, because now you can have your beats where you're pushing on the plot of the session, whatever that is.
Right.
Assuming it's adventure fiction or even mystery fiction or whatever it is. Mystery game, adventure game. Sorry, and we are creating fiction essentially at the table. So there you go. If it's just a straight up romance game, then it's different, right? Like then you can really push on those pieces. And figure out how people deal with it. And then, of course, then roles probably need to happen at some point. There needs to be a mechanic for how it works, whether it be, we've engaged this move, roll 2d6, let's see what happens.
Yeah. Make a move, there's a move around it, or something like
also,
that.
if that clock is only a 3-tick clock for, like, in harming your relationship, like for your bond to be threatened, then every time you have a mark there, it could be 2d6 minus.
So let me just, because we're now just playing in this space. What if, when you first form your relationship, it's a tiny clock, 3-4 tick, but over time you can invest points to make it a bigger clock.
Absolutely.
So it's like in the beginning, your relationship's kind of fragile, and if you don't keep tending to it, outside pressures can knock it over. But over time, you buy the bigger clock, and it's not that you ever can neglect your relationship. Yeah. It's just that your bond is deepened. Yes.
Marshall and Lily had like a 10-point clock.
Yeah.
At the end.
Not
in the beginning.
Not at the beginning.
Right.
You want me to hit you with even a more interesting kind of thing that you can play with?
Yes.
The concept of new relationship energy. So you have this interesting little small clock, but you have a couple of extra points on the outside, at least for the next 3 sessions.
Yeah.
And every session, one of those goes away because your new relationship energy is bleeding off.
I love it. Because new relationship energy is absolutely a thing. The other one I was going to tack onto this about the bond, the downside to the bond is that, like, if we were talking about fate, and this is an aspect, like, I'm totally compelling it to make you prioritize your partner over other things. Like, for instance, the MacGuffin is right there, but your partner is hanging on, like, to the edge
I'm compelling that every time.
Like, you're not getting the MacGuffin.
No.
Like, you know, like, you could chase after the bad guy running away with the MacGuffin, or you could save your partner. Here's a fate point, go save your partner because this guy's getting away. So that is also when we talk about downside to a relationship, right, one of the things we can say is that, and we know this to be true, right, because I think this happens to all of us, when we fall in love, we shuffle all of our relationships because, like, one, we pick up new relationship energy, but we're like, it's this person, like, gets vaulted to the top of the pile, and your other relationships kind of sort themselves out. I had a friend in high school, I'm not going to name who it is because I think some people in this chat room I went to high school with, but they'll certainly know who it is. The second they got a girlfriend, the rest of us, like, all fell to the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as they started dating somebody, it was like, well, we won't see them for a while until they break up. And then they would break up and they'd be back. And it was just a thing, right? It was just like, well, that's who they are. Like, they're the kind of person that as soon as they date, they're like, this is the most important person in my whole world. And, like, the rest of you.
I know what that's like. I do a little bit of that sometimes, too.
Oh, I think everybody does it to some level. This was kind of a more extreme
To
level.
From a certain perspective, it's true.
No, yes, to a certain level, it is true,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
In the more extreme levels, it can be annoying. And when you're in high school and love is very quixotic, right? Like, then it's just annoying because it's happening constantly, right? It's in, it's out, it's in. They're in love, they're out of love, like.
It's that thing about, like, finding balance in your life, but yeah, that's outside.
Correct.
We're not a relationship advice dating show, so we're gonna get away from that. I think.
Yeah. Back to the mechanics.
Don't. How do you want to mechanize it?
No. I'm just saying, the fact we often give GMing advice largely by the disasters we've created.
This is me
as
shaking my head.
GMs.
This is me shaking my head at all of you
It
on
might
camera.
mean that at the same level we can do the same thing about giving relationship advice based on the disasters we've created as people. Anyway, we're not going to do that.
That is a stretch, but I hear what you're saying.
I mean, I've made the joke that most of my GMing advice comes from a closet full of skeletons of all the, like, bad, dumb, and horrible things I've done as a GM that I've learned from. There's something to be said for that at a relationship level. Anyway.
Anyway.
Okay, so cool. We've talked about
bond.
Yeah, we talked about how to create one. We talked about what to do with a bond.
Yeah, we talked about a little bit how they can break up, how these bonds can break.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's talk about other ways to push on these bonds.
Yeah, because now that once we have a mechanic like that, like a bond, like now we have a thing we can, like, mechanically push on.
Yeah, so we have external tension and internal tension. So outside pressures are a lot of the things that either will come to bear against the characters based on the backstories that they have provided, or things that the game master will bring up. I mean, and like I said, we mentioned a few of them, like friends. We just talked about that. Like, well, you've just abandoned all your friends, and your friends are like, "Where are you?
Yeah, what's up, dude?
Why haven't you been hanging out for like the last 2 weeks? Why haven't you called any of us?
Right. So like,
why do you keep canceling game night?
Right. In Hydra Hackers terms, like, your person you're tight with just, like, became your partner, and all of your friends just got moved to cool. Right. And now know they've been moved to cool.
Yep.
Right. Like whatever, dude. Like, we don't see you anymore.
And then there's a thing though, like, what does that mean mechanically and in play?
Yeah.
So it obviously has a very narrative impact on the game, which is like, oh, there might be jealousy or tension, or like this person stole their friend, or the person who they're actually friends with is like, they're just a jerk for not actually talking to us anymore.
Sure.
So that's the narrative stuff.
Yeah. In Hydra Hackers, mechanically, the help mechanic is based, your ability to help someone is based on your relationship with them. So, like, when you're tight with someone, you grant them advantage, but when you're cool with someone, you only give them a +1 forward.
See, that's a really good mechanism for how to simulate all that stuff.
Right, because now your relationships are shuffled, and now your friend, like, you'd like to help your friend more, but you actually just can't. Right? Like, sorry, bro, this is all I got in the social currency. So yeah, what other ways do we mechanize?
I got distracted. Eric Simon's watching High School Musical and the series, and he said it's really good. And I love me.
Is that the Disney Plus one?
Yeah.
No. It's High School Musical, the series.
Yeah.
It's got a 3-part name.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a terrible name.
Wow, that's like if I named something.
But I'm a huge fan of things like Glee. So,
sure.
You know, like I've seen it on there. I wasn't sure if I was going to watch it. Now I am going to watch it. And I bet there's a whole lot of relationship type mechanics that can be drawn out of that show.
Oh, I just saw Eric's question from before. Would marriage and the relationship clock start a new clock? It certainly could.
It could, yeah. I would just I would reinforce the clock and also give some more benefits and then put some more restrictions on it.
Sure.
Because that's kind of how that goes. You're making a deeper commitment, so it's going to cost you more, but you're going to get more out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, that's not exactly how marriage tends to work all the time. Because marriage is not really. Marriage is. People like to think of it romantically, but and it is romantic and it's spiritual bonding in a lot of ways. This is, of course, my opinion that I'm going to throw out there now, so people can yell at me if they feel like it.
Again, I'm going to go with the fact that we make rules about stabbing each other with swords, and
Sure.
we're okay with the inaccuracies of that. Let's just be okay with the inaccuracies of the rules we make for romance.
So whatever you want your marriage rules to be, like you have to decide that. Like in the modern day, while we all romanticize and love marriage, it's really just a legally binding contract, essentially. Like you have a bunch of legal things that you're tied up in with each other at the moment. Now, if you want to take that to a different place and talk about the spiritual and emotional parts of it,
that's the bonuses of the bond and all of that.
Yeah,
like
bonus to the bond, also more cost to the bond because you're reconfirming and deepening your commitment.
Sure.
So there is probably some amount of more pluses and more minuses to having it.
Yeah. So again, I want to just say this because you've been doing this as you've been talking about it, which is you're worried about making it as realistic as possible, but we write lots of rules that aren't as realistic as possible, and we all live through them, right? Like,
so I saw a comment like 18 years married. I hear you, Chris. Like, I've been with the same person for 12 years. I'm technically spiritually married. Like, we got married, but I don't have a legal document.
Sure, I was there.
I know, you were there. So I mean,
sand castles in the sand.
Almost
man.
nobody thinks. I mean, no one in this modern world would consider me married, but I do. So,
well, I mean, I think.
So it's like
it has a lot of different.
What do you want your marriage mechanics to mean in your game? Is the question.
Because let's be truthful. Your feelings about the relationship mechanics in your game are going to be a designer bias. It's the same bias that you bring when what's your decisions about ranged weapons versus melee weapons, right? Some games treat them as the same. Some games treat them very differently. Like, what I'm saying is that no designer designs something without putting their own personal bias and spin
absolutely.
it. Like when we talk about the Hydra hacker, the neighborhood mechanic, the thing that I always tell people is that you have a fixed amount of social currency to spend in your life. I don't know if that's true. I just say it is.
Yeah.
Right? So if you say that your marriage mechanic means that you have this kind of bond, that's your designer bias. Like, it's your preference.
Exactly.
And to me, I wouldn't get bent about that any more than I would get bent about, like, well, you can't shoot that many arrows in a turn.
But I'm talking to the greater role-playing game community, and there are some people that are going to have opinions about that. So
I mean, some people have opinions about how many arrows you can shoot as well. I just
some people will have some strong opinions.
Also have some strong opinions about how many arrows you can shoot. I'm just saying, who do you listen to?
Fair.
that's all.
Not me about the institution of marriage. Definitely not.
I'm just saying that
design-wise, whatever you want it to be.
All rules have a design bias. The person who wrote the rules have some feeling about whatever it is they're writing.
Yeah. Somebody mentioned roll for laundry. Like in association with marriage, like I've been rolling for laundry for a decade, so you know.
Dude, you never stop rolling for laundry. Laundry never stops.
Never stops.
And if you want to play the advanced game of laundry, go get kids.
I also like the idea that if you volunteer to go do the laundry, like you don't get a tick on your clock, but you definitely didn't lose that tick on your clock.
Yeah. You neither
if you
advance
don't finish the laundry, you're losing a tick.
Now maybe if you put the pen in the wash with the laundry.
That's your complication.
That's your complication.
Right?
Like how do you?
Minus.
See now how do you deal with that? Like here's the rom-com sitcom role-playing game. Like okay, hon, I'll go do the laundry.
So
and then I went down and did the laundry, and I accidentally left that Sharpie in the wash with the laundry, and now everything's all marked up.
So here's what I would do for this, right? If we're gonna do a real rom-com, like will they, won't they kind of thing. I think the mechanic. So same thing that we've had before, the clock and whatever. Right, except that when those scenes play, each player has something like a coin, right? Like a plus side, a minus side, whatever.
Sure.
Right, And at the end of the scene, they each put down how they think the scene went. Okay, right? So like I did the wash, but I left the Sharpie in the wash and it got all messed up, right? I think like I did a bad, right? So I put a minus. But maybe the partners, like, this was a really honest attempt and like I was sick and they really wanted to do it and they really didn't know how to do laundry, whatever, and they put a plus. And then when you reveal, then like somehow you resolve how the
whichever one is the higher one gets the thing.
Like if there's a plus, if there's a plus minus, the clock doesn't advance. If they're both pluses, the clock advances. And if they're both minuses, the other clock, the breakup stress clock or whatever advances.
That sounds great. That's a great mechanic.
Right.
I love it.
So then what you have is you have these awkward scenes and these weird things happen, but depending on are you sweet? How did it play out? Like all of those things, like you could be like, well, this date wasn't terrible. I'll give it a plus. And the other person's like, oh my God, it was a disaster, but I got to spend time with him. It was great. I give it a plus. And it's like, oh, look at that. Your relationship just advanced a notch.
What is the detriment then? What is the carrot for people putting minuses?
Well, I mean, then yes, there has to be a thing where you get something. So again, I always think like
because I'm thinking with the laundry situation. Because as a game master, I assess that complication. Like, well, you could just be honest, but if you're honest, your clock's going to go down by 1 tick. But you could, if you wanted to, try to deal with this situation by fixing the problem.
Sure.
And if you fix the problem, nothing bad happens, and even maybe you get a plus to your clock. But if it goes disastrously long, you're going to lose 2 ticks. Yeah. Now we're into rom-com territory.
Yeah. But I think that thing of allowing each player to assess how they think the scene
I like
went,
that a lot too.
Right?
I'm trying to figure out what the design.
No, you're right, because there has to be why would you
ever put a minus down?
Yeah.
What do I get by putting the minus down?
Often as a designer, right? This is a case where I figure out half the mechanic first, right? And then I get stuck because then I do what you just did, right? Which is I finish it and I'm like, yes, each person puts down a coin. And if it's this, and then I get to, okay, but why would you put down the minus, right? And then I'm like, but then this is a case where I'm like, okay, don't throw this away yet, right? Start working.
That needs to be where it comes into the other half of the game. What is the rest of the game, right?
Right. What is the thing that when you don't connect that you get, right? Like, I don't know what that is yet, because I think you'd have to see a larger picture.
I mean, I like the idea that to get the best possible situation there, someone has to put the plus and someone has to put the minus, because then you have no idea which one of you is going to put the plus and which one of you is going to put the minus.
Yeah, that's also there's some game theory I think around this, right? About picking.
Because in the rom-com situation, if we're playing a rom-com romance game, then the plus minus is the funny situation that everything works out. But the plus is maybe not great, and the minus is also maybe not great.
Did Eric bring up the prisoner's dilemma?
Yeah.
God, this is why
I had to look it up.
This is why I love this guy so much.
I know, right? I was actually angling at the prisoner's dilemma in the game theory of what we're talking about.
Yeah, there's definitely space for some game theory thinking around that. But I do like this concept of, if we were making a rom-com game, I do like the concept that you play out the scene with whatever disasters are in it. And then both people secretly vote for did you think that came off charming or was that a disaster? Whatever. And then you resolve.
And regardless whether you put the die plus or minus, then of course you can say afterwards what you were thinking.
Oh yeah.
The mechanics will play out and the story will move forward, but of course then there's the narrative part well, this is why I put this down. And this is where I'm moving from with my character at this point.
So now if I'm designing a game from scratch, I'm making a card game, by the way, Bob. I'm making a card game where I have cards that are locations, right? And then I have some cards about ways to make connections. And also in my deck, I have some cards about ways to mess up connections. And we flip a card. We're at the beach. I draw a card. I've got awkward clothing moment, right? But you've got reveal something deep and personal about yourself. And then we act out the scene. And then at the end, we're like, okay, was that meaningful? Like was that something that built a relationship or a disaster? Like,
you get a little snake oil component there where you're trying to get the other person to.
Yeah, but you're just like I have to play the card that says like
absolutely.
wardrobe malfunction, right? So like I don't know, my bathing suit falls off in the water, like I'm standing naked in the water and I can't come out of the water, and like your part of the scene was like maybe we were floating out in the water and you're telling me your life story, and it's like it's really serious and everything, but all of a sudden I'm like, I don't have my trunks.
Yeah, like right, like
right,
that is,
like is that cute?
Yeah,
oh, that's that is a rom-com moment right there.
That's the rom-com card game right there. I just whipped that thing up.
We didn't talk about Starcrossed yet. We probably should at some point.
Yeah, we were actually making up things, but Starcross obviously is a game that uses Jenga Tower to simulate the will they, won't they bond, right? Because that was one of the early mechanics we talked about. The Jenga Tower is that, right? And everything you do about the will you or won't you bond is all centered around manipulating the Jenga Tower.
We only got about 5 more minutes really we can spend on this.
Whew, this was good. Okay.
So we did talk a little bit about outside pressure, because we were talking about like things that happen, right?
Yes.
Work obligations like laundry, whatever. Friends and family, things like that. A lot of times that stuff gets also lumped in or is a foil or a mirror to personal historical issues or internal pressures. Mm-hmm. So like you said, someone's talking about something serious and then somebody loses their trunk. Like that serious thing was something that they were trying to get off their mind, right? Like to help deepen the relationship, to make that more of a to give something to that person, essentially, to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So, like, how do we put these things into play? These personal views that don't match up, emotional baggage or scars, things like that. I mean, those are essentially secrets that you will reveal to somebody to strengthen your bond. Mm-hmm. But you don't know if it's actually going to strengthen your bond or make it worse, because that happens.
So this is... Okay. This is interesting because I have a weird kind of way to connect to this.
Sure, go ahead.
So there's a thing in kink where...
I've not played the Fog of Love board game yet. I really want to. I've seen it a couple of times. It looks fascinating.
So there's a thing in kink where eventually...
Somebody asked in the chat room, sorry.
Yes. Eventually with a partner, you have to start revealing your kinks, right? And the thing about kinks is that like sometimes people have like really harsh takes on them, right?
Yeah.
So the term that's often used is, and I pull this strictly out of, what's the comic book, the graphic novel? Why can't I think of it? Damn it. Sunstone. Trust falls. You have to take a trust fall, right?
Sure.
Like I have to reveal this thing to you, and I have to hope that you still like me the same, if not more, but hopefully not less when I reveal it.
So the way to mechanize that trust fall initially in my mind is I'm going to tell you something about my character that is potentially problematic for you.
Yep.
You have to make a choice whether to accept that about the person.
Right.
And strengthen your bond.
Yep.
Or reject that about the person and get something else.
Yes.
Otherwise, there's no tension.
So in this case, if we're doing our fictional game with the coin, when you reveal this thing, you don't put a coin down. Only they do. Right? Because they either accept it or reject it. Like, you get a thing for confessing it, right? Because you always get a thing, like, taking the trust fall is always a brave thing. Right? But that person has to make a decision. Like, do they say, like, look, everybody makes mistakes in their lives. Yes, you robbed a convenience store, but you went to jail, you've gotten a job, like you've cleaned yourself up.
Or I can't believe you've waited 5 months to tell me that you were a convict.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the other side of the coin, right? So the one side of the coin is like, look, I'm going to accept this about you. And I love you. And like, that was your past. That's not your present. And the other one is like, oh my God, how did you wait 5 months to tell me like you were in jail?
Mm-hmm. But what do I get if I decide to take that route?
Yeah, again,
what is the currency of the game? What is the
so
power
again,
of the game that is outside of the randomizer?
So I think what it winds up being, if we're doing the rom-com game, right? The balance is, are you putting energy points, whatever, into the relationship or into yourself.
Yeah, because that's a big thing with rom-com too, like personal.
Right, because are you going to be brave? Because all relationships are vulnerability. Are you going to be brave and commit and put your stuff into this relationship, which if it doesn't work, you lose your points stuff or whatever, or at the end of the game, right? Or are you going to put it in yourself, which means you'll get to the game okay, but you won't get the romance.
Yeah.
Right?
It also works for the dramatic version of these romances, right? Like it's exactly the same. It's just the outcome is, instead of being, funny, it could be tragic.
Right. And that thing you're talking about the revelation, that's petition grantor.
It is.
Right? Because you're petitioning, like, accept this thing about me.
And Eric Simon in the chat room mentioned like a bid mechanic.
Yeah.
Like that could also be functional. Like, look, as the petitioner, I'm going to put this much currency on the table, and I'm going to tell you this thing, and if you accept it, you get this much currency.
Right. So in my rom-com card game, that and I keep looking at Bob because it's a card game.
Of course.
In the rom-com card game, in your hand of cards, through the course of the scenes you have to play, one or two of them are revelations about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of them are minor, like I leave my socks all over the house, right? Like, and some of them are major, like I once did time for armed robbery, right?
Or I have a kid.
Right, and you have to play them into...
it's strange, but I still have a kid out there somewhere.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a thing, right? If,
it
that's
doesn't... a thing that happens.
And it's not a thing that's immediately obvious about you.
Nope.
Right? But it's a thing that, like, in a scene, like, I could look at my hand of cards and be like, you know what? This is the scene where I'm going to make my... I'm going to make my deep reveal. And then meanwhile, you're like, this is the scene where I have a wardrobe malfunction.
Yeah.
Right? Because now we're strictly in rom-com land. Like,
Sure,
I'm
absolutely.
telling you I was a convict. You're freaking out about a convict, but also at the same time, your trunks have gone out with the tide.
We are talking about situational comedy at this point.
Yeah.
Right?
And there can also be mechanical difference. You've got a hand of cards. You're holding the card that says, I did time for armed robbery.
Right.
If you pull that out early and go, hey, I did time,
It'll probably have less impact.
it may have less impact.
But-
you can mechanically put some weight on that, where you drop that late, like you're gonna.
It's
you're
why
gonna
have you?
a different.
Yeah, because then the question is why have you withheld this from me for so
Exactly.
long?
And that might be where the bidding part is good.
Yeah.
Right? Because in the early part, it might be just like we're early on. I can only bid like a point on this
Not
thing.
only that, like either you accept this about me or you don't, right? Like this is a thing
Yeah.
that I'm okay with. Like it happened. I can't do anything about it.
Yep.
Right. So maybe,
But later
maybe
it's-
before the revelation, you bid so many of these like relationship or individual points, and you're like, look, I have to tell you this thing about me. And at that moment, I'm like, it's early in the relationship. I'm going to put up like 2 on this one.
Yeah, we're definitely talking about a game that is about resource management and storytelling surrounding comedic situations.
Okay, so
and,
wait,
and romance.
I'm
really surrounding
evolving.
romance.
I'm evolving this game really quick. Ready? So you have a number of these individual points.
Sure.
Okay. At the end of the game, you either have built a relationship that lasts, right? And there's some criteria. If you can't build the relationship that lasts, everything you put into it goes away, and you're stuck with whatever individual points you have left. Right? So there's a heavy, like, you either have to get to this game with enough individual points to come out of this relationship with, like, no serious damage or baggage, or you have to get enough points into the relationship so that when you get to the end of the game, you're together and you stay together. Okay?
Yeah, clearly each player has a personal pool, and then there's the shared relationship pool.
You build that shared
you're
relationship
trying to
pool.
get to a certain threshold.
So here's the thing.
I would love to see.
So now I'd
love to see some sort of randomizer
Right.
that also helps with some of that stuff.
But so now you bid on a scene, right? So like we're going on our first date, and I'm like, cool, I'll pony up a point of my individual. You pony up a point of your individual. If we both pull pluses, both points go into the
I mean,
relationship.
you're essentially looking at a game that's about like, I have these goals on my character sheet that I'm trying to accomplish. We have the shared goal that we're trying to accomplish, and the randomizer is really is essentially the prisoner's dilemma.
Oh
like,
my
we
God.
don't know exactly what each one's going to do, so we should just try to play it as close to our character as we can.
I've almost got this game worked out now.
Yep.
You
All right.
have a dream. I'm going to open a bakery. I'm going to open a shop. I need so many of these personal points
Oh, look
in
at that.
order to get
Follow my dream.
to follow my dream. Or I like the relationship. Maybe it's not like you can't have both,
I'm going
but
to cut you off in like 60 seconds.
I know. I'm just saying, like, there's meat on this bone.
There
like,
is. It's an interesting idea.
I see a thing. I'm gonna go get my notebook in a few minutes and write some notes down.
All right.
You can cut it off here. I think.
Let's move on. That was good.
I was just gonna ask you before we move on, because I don't want to. We'll stop the topic before we move on. And I'm gonna ask the same question to the chat room, but I'm gonna ask it to you two first. This is a little different than ways we've done the garage before. Tell me, did you enjoy doing this?
I love designing games, so I'm fine with it.
Okay. Did you have fun doing it?
Of course.
Okay, Bob?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Chat room?
Chat room, let us know.
Chat room, was this a thing where you're like,
Also, people who are listening, let us know.
Yep.
Yeah. Chat room will give us instant feedback.
Yes.
Yeah.
Listeners can also.
You can go to the forums.
We
You
just
can
use
go
the normal
to
channels,
Twitter.
the forums,
you can
the
go
Twitters.
anywhere.
Okay, because this isn't the only time we have to do this.
Yeah.
No,
Like,
I
we
think
could do
is
this for other
totally
topics. Like,
Yeah.
The
this is,
fabrication machine is important.
the fabrication machine may become a new segment. In which case, we'll come up with a better name. Than the
You know what I
fabrication
didn't do? I didn't mention another show on Misdirected, Mark.
I was just going to ask, did we do that during the
No,
first
no.
break?
So there's
Let's
this.
do that.
I'm not going to do it though because it's about me.
Oh, I'll do it. I'll do it. Can I do it? Can I do
Yeah,
it?
you can do it.
This guy
Hi.
and the Mad Wizard Sean Merwin dish about everything D&D on Down with D&D, with a focus on the brand and the newest edition of the world's most popular tabletop RPG. And you know they were talking about that.
Wildemount?
They were talking about that CR book.
All the folks out there crying about it is
Yeah.
hilarious.
Man,
hilarious.
my Twitter feed was like, I just gave up on Twitter yesterday. I was like, I looked and I'm like, well, what's this thing? I'm like, Critical Hits made a book? Awesome. And then I'm like scrolling and I'm like expecting it to just be like woot, woot, woot. And then I see like this whole bunch of crying and I'm like, what is, I read a few of them and I was like, I'm done with Twitter for today. Like, I'll be back tomorrow.
All right, we got about 10 minutes for the conversation corner. Let me go find the conversation corner. That's important.
Yep. Right here.
We are now in the conversation corner. I love the. I love
that
the
was
corner.
fun.
That was a good
That
time.
was fun.
We'll talk
I
about that in
like
the
doing
after
stuff like
show.
that. All right. What tell me about anything. I have done a ton of topics for myself too.
Okay, I'll pick one. We just went a
Yeah,
round
we'll just
table.
round table.
I finished. I finished my part of the Turning Point manuscript, which means that now a bunch of it goes to Senda and then back and forth as we fix and clean things up. But what it means is that Turning Point is way closer than I thought it was to actually being ready for Kickstarter. So excited.
Nice.
Yay.
Bob?
Super excited. I started working on a spreadsheet for us to help track things for our stronghold in Forbidden Lands, because we have stuff that we have to manage. We have people that we have hired that we have to pay. We have resources that we have to acquire and stockpile and use to build other resources, et cetera, et cetera. So I took all the information from the book, created some tables and some drop downs
cool.
and some linkage and stuff, and we can track all of our stuff as we go through it. I enjoyed doing it.
It's cool because it's a cool downtime mechanic for that game is building your stronghold and getting the benefits of having a stronghold.
That's pretty slick.
Yeah. It's good.
So for everybody out there, we booked our hotel for Origins yesterday.
Yeah, we did. That was super. That all spun up really quick. I was like, hey, did anyone book hotel rooms yet? And then like within a day we were done.
Yeah. So if you are interested in hanging out in the same hotel that we're all hanging out at,
and you can't get into downtown because we couldn't.
We are staying at the Super 8 by Wyndham Columbus West. That's a 560. What?
Yeah, it's like 10 miles west of the city.
It is 10 miles west of the city.
It is pretty much a straight line into the city though. Like it's right off the highway.
Yeah, it's easy to get there.
Yeah, super quick drive right into the city.
Super 8 by Wyndham Columbus West. If you want to come hang out with us at our hotel and play games with us in the evening, that's where we're staying. Get a hotel with us.
Yeah. Shack up with us.
It was cheap.
Shacking up.
It was cheap. I mean, I'll be honest. I tried for the housing block when it came up.
Yeah.
I took one look at it. I was like, blah. Like, I hate housing blocks.
Go ahead. You again.
Okay.
We still got time.
I finished reading Ancillary Justice, which I thought was an amazing, fun book. I say fun. I don't want to make it sound trivial. It was good. It was a really good, solid science fiction book. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I wanted to pre-order. I wanted to order my copy of the second book and have it ready, but I was too scared that if I opened up the page in Amazon, I might see what the book was about and then know the ending of the book of Ancillary Justice. So I didn't do it. I have to order the book. So that's me, Ancillary Justice.
Yeah.
Bob?
So I am one episode away from finishing season 3 of Runaways on Hulu.
Oh, nice.
I am very much looking forward to the finale of this. So far, it's been a good final season because, of course, it was canceled because they're bringing everything back in-house off of the other networks.
I haven't finished watching it yet.
But interesting story, and I'm enjoying it, so yay.
Go, Chris.
Next.
So, for those of you who are in the Western New York area, I'll be at Running Gag. I'm running 4 games already on the schedule. If you want to play some D&D Eberron, I'll be running that. If you want to play some Dungeon World Eberron, I'll be running that. If you want to play my game, the Black Corner, powered by the Ordered Number engine, I'm also running a session of that. So come on out.
Remind me when we get to the after show. I have an idea for a logo for the Ordered Number engine.
Sure, I'm into it. All right, that is my next thing. Go ahead, Phil.
I have a teaser. I'm gonna vague cast this because we're gonna talk about it more next week. But I got a really awesome opportunity to review something that's very cool. I'm very excited about it. It should be at my house tomorrow, so I will put the first things up on Twitter about it. But I'm super excited, and I kind of hoping, fingers crossed, it leads to getting to do some other reviews along the same lines. But Chris is going to help me out. We're going to do a full video review one night on Twitch with cameras and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Very excited. Very excited. Sorry. Bob.
So, played some more Minecraft. I've been working on putting a wall around my little peninsula to keep my compound area safe from outside threats. And just, kind of like just puttering.
Are you building it like yourself, or are you like
No, I'm
taking
using
from
the
capsules? I got some.
Yeah.
You can come check
No,
out.
I'm done. It's the wall is complete, so.
I'm very close to starting up my reactor.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, another one from me. Maybe the last one. No, we still got time. So, new Doctor Who started.
Yeah, I saw the previews for it.
I love me some Jodie Whittaker. Jodie Whittaker is wonderful as the Doctor. The first 2 episodes are very James Bondian inspired.
Sure, that's cool.
And the first episode, I'm like, what is all this nonsense? And then I got to the end of the episode, I'm like, oh, no, you've hooked me. Thank you. I enjoyed some of the episodes from season 1 of Jodie Whittaker, but this episode, the first 2 episodes of season 2, are better than any of the episodes, in my opinion, of season 1 of Jodie Whittaker. So super fun if you like the Doctor. New Doctor Who has been pretty entertaining.
That's awesome. I'm really happy that that they did a really good job with her as a Doctor, because there was so much dumb backlash.
There was a super hilarious joke in the episode where she apparates in the 1820s in the middle of like a emporium of like people showing off amazing inventions from then, and she does a little dance and it goes, and you have now seen the apparating man. No, wait, let me do that again. Dances the apparating woman. Gets me every time.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, I feel like if you're female, like, it's awesome. If you're trans, it's awesome. Like, it's all awesome for all those reasons, right? Like, this is the Doctor.
Yeah.
One of the most culturally popular icons of the last, like, 40 years. And now a woman. Wonderful.
Yep.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
All right. Anything else?
Let's see. What do I got? I talked about the Minecraft reactor thing, which is going to bring me to the end of my mech arc. Like, once I build this thing, I will, like, go off and do some other stuff in the game, because I have built this ridiculously large tower of technology that's, like, automated and, like, does all the, like, it's got all these factory processes in it. And then I'm going to go off and do magic. Like, that's my next... I'm off to do some astral sorcery is my next gig. And then can I automate my astral sorcery, because I'll never give up my mechanism ways. So yeah, that's me.
Bobby, anything else, or are you good?
My list is done. So
All right. We played Scum and Villainy.
yes, we did.
We got pretty deep into the way.
We had a very serious metaphysical kind of way session.
I mean, there was a chase scene through ice at the beginning of it, through an ice cave.
Uh-huh.
That wasn't even on me. Like, you all did that. That was a
Yep.
terrible engagement roll. By the way, poor engagement rolls lead to being chased by starships through ice planets,
Yep.
apparently. So that was fun.
Poor engagement roll gets
Yeah.
you every time.
But we're exploring the origin of the way in our Scum and Villainy game. That's been pretty
neat.
enjoyable.
The way, for those of you who don't play Scum and Villainy, the Force.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the Force. You got anything else? Got time for one more.
I'm starting to read Bite Marks.
Is it good?
I don't know. I'm starting to read it.
So I thought maybe you've read like 3 pages.
Well, remember, Senda and I in Pandas talked about this is the game that we're going to co-GM. So I'm now that I finished Ancillary Justice, I'm going to take a break before I start reading Ancillary Sword, and I'm going to go knock off Bite Marks and read it real quick. Because, werewolves and shit. Because what's not to love?
Okay, that's our show. We're going to do some Patreon shoutouts now.
Wrap it up.
GM Gerrymander, the Lord of the After Show, if I remember correctly, because I don't have the names in there. Toby Sennett, the Baron of Britannia. And then there's Zach Goins, Troy Sandlin, Will Doyle, Sean the Mad Wizard Merwin, Cindy Moore, Miko Froelich, Kevin Minorzak, the Old School DM Randy Farmer, Chris Constantine, Eric Mengi, Eric Simon, Brett Just Brett, The Rainmaker, and
Chris Steele.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
If you are free Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. the Queen's time, come join us live on Twitch, where you can chat with other listeners in the awesome chat room for life and ask us the occasional question.
if you can't make it to the live show, check out our podcast each week wherever you get your podcasts. Also, take a listen to some of the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, such as Down with D&D, Bone, Stone, and Obsidian, Pandas Talking Games, The Gnome Cast, Zhang Yu Hustle, She's a Super Geek, and Bonus Experience. You can and should also check out our sibling podcasts, Tabletop Bellhop, The Knights of the Night, and the Always Amazing Gaming and BS. And if you want to, on Monday evenings, you can watch the FM Gamers play Spelljammed, a 5e actual play, or you can watch the BXP Bicons on Sunday evenings every other week, playing Blades in the Dark. I forget what the name of their game is. A Blade... Do I have it written down? I probably don't have it written down anywhere. We should write that down.
We should.
Bob, make a note. But they're playing Blades in the Dark. It's pretty good.
After you've gone on your first date and want to tell us all about it, leave us some feedback. You can reach us directly via email at mmp@misdirectedmark.com. Hit us up on Twitter. The show on the network is at MisdirectedMark. This guy is Robert M. Everson. That guy is the Light 101, and I am DNA Phil.
If you like what we do here and on the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, you can support our Patreon campaigns. MMP Down with D&D and Pandas Talking Games are at patreon.com/MMP. She's a Super Geek is at patreon.com/SassGeek. Zhang Yu Hustle is at patreon.com/Zhang Yu Hustle. And of course, Bonus Experience is at patreon.com/Bonus Experience. Go figure how that worked out. Patrons of MMP Down with D&D and Pandas Talking Games get access to the after show, pre-production show notes, musical parodies, the Pandas Talking Games bonus outtakes,
The Sneak Attack from Down with D&D,
and other special releases.
This has been a Misdirected Mark production. The media arm of Encoded Designs. I got a mic right here for you to punch. A mic drop.
We out!